The brutal murder of Jesse Baird and his partner, Luke Davies, has shocked and devastated the community. At 26 and 29 years old respectively, their lives were violently cut short, allegedly at the hands of Beau Lamarre-Condon, a serving police officer who had a brief romantic involvement with Baird last year. The discovery of human remains near Bungonia, a small town in the southern tablelands Goulburn region of New South Wales, has only deepened the sorrow and outrage surrounding this case. NSW Police Commissioner Karen Webb's description of the murders as a crime of passion has ignited a fierce backlash from anti-domestic violence advocates and experts. Critics argue that this terminology not only romanticizes the horrific act, but also undermines the seriousness of domestic violence by framing it as an inevitable consequence of overwhelming emotions rather than a deliberate act of power and control. Tarang Chawla, an advocate whose sister was murdered by her partner, has vocally opposed the commissioner's use of language. A loving couple in Jesse Baird and Luke Davies have had their lives stolen from them, their bodies yet to be located, he posted on Instagram. And the man alleged to be responsible is a currently serving police officer. His actions are being trivialized as a crime of passion, which reduces a deadly act of power, control, and entitlement to a mere emotional outburst. This backlash underscores a broader issue with how society and media often depict domestic violence. Instead of acknowledging these crimes for what they are, acts of violence fueled by control and entitlement, they are frequently framed as tragic consequences of romantic entanglements or emotional volatility. Such narratives not only misrepresent the nature of these crimes, but also perpetuate harmful myths and attitudes. Laura Richards, a criminal behavioral analyst and advocate, reinforced this sentiment. "Stop minimizing and excusing male violence," she wrote on Instagram. "This was not a crime of passion, it was likely a lethal act rooted in power and control." Richards' comments highlight the dangers of reducing complex and brutal crimes to simplistic explanations that overlook the systemic issues underlying domestic violence. The commissioner's comments were made in the context of a broader debate about the role of police in the Mardi Gras parade. With Webb emphasizing that the double murder was not a hate crime while she intended to clarify the nature of the crime, her choice of words has unfortunately perpetuated some of the most damaging attitudes toward domestic and family violence. These attitudes are deeply ingrained in society and are often reinforced by media portrayals that frame domestic violence as the result of love gone wrong or a jealous rage. Media narratives play a significant role in shaping public perceptions of domestic violence. The portrayal of these crimes as inevitable outcomes of romantic turmoil distorts the reality of domestic violence. For instance, headlines such as "Man arrested on 21 charges after date goes horribly wrong devotion became danger for McDonald's car attack victim," and "How Lisa Harnum almost escaped her deadly romance" contribute to a harmful rhetoric that obscures the true nature of these acts. In the case of Lisa Harnum, who was murdered after being thrown off a balcony by her partner, news outlets referred to her death as a deadly romance. This framing trivializes the violence and abuse she endured, portraying her murder as an unfortunate result of a failed relationship rather than an act of calculated brutality. Similarly, the Cairns Post described a man who allegedly bashed, choked, and raped a woman as being involved in a date gone horribly wrong, further minimizing the severity of the crime. These headlines and narratives suggest that domestic violence is a result of personal failings or emotional disturbances rather than acknowledging it as a systemic issue rooted in control and power. Such portrayals not only distort the reality of domestic violence, but also place undue blame on victims and survivors. By framing these crimes as the unfortunate byproduct of love or romantic relationships, society perpetuates the myth that victims somehow provoke or deserve the violence inflicted upon them. This issue is not limited to media portrayals. Public figures and even legal authorities can contribute to these harmful narratives, as seen in the recent comments by Commissioner Webb. Her use of the term crime of passion reflects a broader societal tendency to excuse or rationalize violence by attributing it to intense emotions. This perspective is dangerously reductive and fails to address the root causes of domestic violence. The reality is that a desire for control and power drives domestic violence. It is an act of domination, fueled by feelings of entitlement and a belief in the perpetrator's right to control their partner's actions. This violence is not a consequence of love, but rather a manifestation of a deep-seated need to exert power over another person. The characterization of domestic violence as a crime of passion diminishes the gravity of these acts and fails to hold perpetrators accountable for their actions. As Cheryl Moody, a femicide researcher, pointed out on Instagram, it is crucial to recognize and challenge these harmful narratives. It's 2024, and here I am having to point out a very basic point about domestic violence and DV killing, she wrote. Domestic violence is not a crime of passion or an act of love. It is a crime marked by control, hate, rage, selfishness, cowardice, entitlement, violence, and abuse. Moody's emphasis on the true nature of domestic violence underscores the importance of using accurate and responsible language when discussing these crimes. Language has the power to shape public perception and influence attitudes. By framing domestic violence in terms of romantic turmoil or emotional instability, society perpetuates myths that obscure the reality of these crimes and contribute to a culture of tolerance for violence. Addressing these issues requires a concerted effort to shift cultural attitudes and change the way domestic violence is represented in media and public discourse. It involves rejecting narratives that excuse or justify violence and instead focusing on the systemic issues that drive such behavior. This shift is essential for creating a society where victims are not blamed for their abuse and where perpetrators are held accountable for their actions. In conclusion, the use of the term crime of passion to describe the murders of Jesse Baird and Luke Davies reflects a broader issue with how domestic violence is understood and discussed. It is crucial to move beyond simplistic and harmful narratives and to recognize domestic violence for what it truly is, an act of power and control. By doing so, we can work towards a more accurate and compassionate understanding of these crimes and take meaningful steps to address and prevent domestic violence.